In 1966, a man named Stephen Gray wrote a letter to the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He wanted to know about a photograph that, he claimed, showed FBI agents standing next to the occupant of a foreign planet. The response came on official FBI letterhead, signed by J. Edgar Hoover himself. And in that response, in plain, formal government English, Hoover wrote these words: "The FBI has never had custody of an occupant from a foreign planet." Think about that sentence for a moment. Not, "Your question is absurd," not, "We don't investigate such things." A precise denial, a specific claim, officially documented. And it's sitting right here in an FBI file that spans nearly 3 decades and 290 pages. But here's what will keep you watching until the very end of this video. That letter from Hoover is not the strangest thing in this file. Buried deeper inside, in a report so disturbing it was classified and forwarded all the way up the chain of command, a man describes what the so-called space people told him about Earth's government officials, about nuclear bombs, about who gets saved and who gets left to die. The FBI typed every word of it, sealed it, filed it, and we are going to read it together. But before we get there, we need to go back to where it all begins, to a single week in November 1957, when the United States government started paying very close attention. The cover of this file says it plainly: FBI Headquarters, Central Records Center, case number 62-HQ83941, Section 9. The first date stamped on the internal documents is November 14, 1957. That's less than 2 months after the Soviets launched Sputnik, the first satellite to orbit the Earth. And the FBI's Dallas office sends a memo directly to the director. The subject line reads in capital letters, "Flying Discs Information Concerning." 2 sentences. That's the entire memo. It says the matter is being referred to OSI, the Office of Special Investigations, and no other action is being taken. Brief, bureaucratic, deliberately quiet. But something was already happening across the country that the Bureau simply could not ignore. 3 days earlier, on November 12, 1957, an internal memo was written by a man named R.R. Roach and sent up the chain to Mr. A.H. Belmont. The subject line: Unidentified Flying Objects, Flying Saucers. And this document tells us something remarkable about the atmosphere inside the United States government at that precise moment in time. Roach writes that ever since the Soviets released Sputnik, there has been a tremendous increase in the number of reported flying saucer sightings all over the country. Then he lists them, not rumors, reports. An object had landed in Nebraska with 6 people aboard, and those people had reportedly talked to a Nebraska farmer before speeding off into space. A fiery object was seen flashing across the southern skies from Albany, Georgia, all the way to Miami, Florida. A Coast Guard cutter had sighted a huge object flying over the Gulf of Mexico. And in the southwestern states, drivers were reporting that UFOs had caused the engines of their automobiles to stop dead. This is actually written in an official government memorandum, not a tabloid, not a radio broadcast, a confidential internal document inside the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Roach then explains what happened next. The Bureau's liaison representative sat down with officials from Air Force intelligence to go over every single case. The Air Force's response? All of the cases mentioned, for all practical purposes, had been resolved as being non-authentic, or there was no basis for the sightings. The field investigators hadn't even submitted their complete reports yet, but the Air Force was already calling them negative. And yet, in the same paragraph, Roach notes that the Air Force is following these sightings closely. All reports are being submitted to the
Technical and Intelligence Center at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio for evaluation and analysis. Hold on here, because that detail becomes more important as this file goes on. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is where all of it lands. Every sighting, every report, every strange account, it goes there. And the FBI is told, clearly, that if anything authentic turns up, the Air Force will immediately notify the Bureau. Keeping in mind, the document says, the Bureau's particular interest in matters concerning espionage and sabotage. Read that again. The FBI is monitoring flying saucer reports because of espionage concerns. The Cold War is the undercurrent running through every single page of this file. Simultaneously, in Havana, Cuba, the FBI's legal attaché is sending his own memo to the director. Date, November 20th, 1957. Subject, reports of flying discs, foreign miscellaneous. Two men, Jose Maria Nieto and Carmelo Guzman, had just arrived in the town of Pinar del Rio after working at the Mata Hambre mines. They claimed they had seen a flying disc in the shape of a man's hat, hovering over the general area for several minutes. They said it was larger than ordinary airplanes normally seen in the area. It was completely silent, and it disappeared at very high speed toward the sea. The attaché notes at the bottom of his report, no corroborating reports were received, and no inquiry has been made by this office. That's the pattern you start to see in these early pages. Reports come in, they get filed, they get forwarded, and then nothing. No investigation, no follow-up. The bureaucratic machinery ingests the strange and outputs silence. But then someone outside the government decides they've had enough of that silence. In January 1958, a letter arrives at FBI headquarters. It was first obtained by the city editor of the Hannibal Courier-Post in Missouri. The man who wrote it identified himself as R.T. Stone, director of the Missouri Filter Center, operating under the letterhead of something called the Intercontinental Aerial Research Foundation, ICOF. Stone was writing to newspapers across the country, asking them to publish a public notice. He wanted citizens everywhere to report UFO sightings directly to him. What's peculiar, and the FBI notes this explicitly.
And then, buried around page 30, something genuinely unlike anything else in this stack of official memoranda appears. It's handwritten, on lined notebook paper. A woman from Michigan, living on a farm in the sticks with her husband and 3 daughters, writes to the Bureau. At the very top of the first page, in her own handwriting, she has written, "This is the true story of our visitors from outer space, 5 or 6 years ago." She describes going to pick up her oldest daughter from a summer job waitressing at a country club around midnight. On the way home, after turning off the highway, she notices a moving object along the side of the road. It has tiny lights blinking on and off. When the lights go off, she writes, she can see a dark, moving shape. She uses the word shape. There was absolutely no noise whatsoever. And then she writes something that stops you cold. She says, "I realized at once there were human beings guiding it." The FBI received this letter, stamped it, filed it, and sent it to OSI. That's what this file is at its core. It is a record of ordinary American citizens and foreign nationals and newspaper editors and military personnel, all trying to make sense of something they genuinely cannot explain, and the government receiving all of it, logging all of it, and in most cases doing precisely nothing with it. But there is one section of this file where the government did more than nothing, and it is by far the most extraordinary material in all 290 pages. Around pages 148 through 152, the FBI's Denver office files a detailed report on a lecture given at the Phipps Auditorium in Denver, Colorado, on April 17, 1960. The speaker is a man named George W. Van Tassel. Van Tassel operated a private Civil Aeronautics Authority-approved airfield in California. He described himself as someone who had been personally visited by people from outer space and said he had taken up the cause of bringing their facts to the American people. What the FBI agent recorded at that lecture is, and I want to be very precise here because this is what is actually typed into an official federal document, Van Tassel claimed that the space people communicate telepathically with the power to know your thoughts. He said many of them are mute, but that a certain number have been trained to speak Earth languages. He said they are equipped with a crystal battery that generates a magnetic field around them, which bends light waves, making them appear invisible. He attributed ghost phenomena, footsteps, doors opening, to the presence of these invisible beings. Can you believe this is actually written in an official FBI surveillance document? But then it gets more serious. Van Tassel said the space people are gravely concerned with our atom bombs. He stated that the explosions of nuclear devices have upset the Earth's rotation, and that the French bomb explosion in North Africa had actually caused earthquakes. He claimed that Earth's officials are aware of this, and that it is the reason for the recent International Geophysical Year, an attempt to determine what can be done. He said these explosions are forcing the Earth toward another polar tilt that will endanger all mankind. And then comes the line that the FBI agent typed without editorial comment, without a footnote, without any expression of disbelief. Van Tassel claimed that the space people are prepared to evacuate those Earth people who have abided by the Golden Rule when the polar tilt occurs, but they will leave the rest to perish.
He also stated, according to this FBI report, that the space people have already contacted officials on Earth and advised them of their concern, but this has not been made public. He said the U.S. Air Force has suppressed information about UFOs and that the Air Force is afraid they will be outmodeled and disbanded if such information gets out. And he said the administration's main concern in not making the information public is that the economy will be disrupted. The FBI attended that lecture, took detailed notes, filed a formal report, and that report is right here. What's striking is not whether Van Tassel was right or wrong. What's striking is that the United States federal government found his claims worth documenting at all, worth the time of a trained special agent, worth the paper and the ink and the file number. By 1963 and 1964, the nature of the correspondence in this file shifts. Now it's private citizens writing directly to the director, asking basic questions. A man from Sacramento, California writes, "Could you tell me if the Federal Bureau of Investigation has an official interest in reports of unidentified flying objects?" He also asks whether the FBI assists the USAF Project Blue Book. Simple questions, earnest questions, the kind of questions someone asks when they genuinely want to know where the line of accountability sits. The FBI's written reply, stamped July 1963, is precise. It says the investigation of unidentified flying objects is not and never has been a matter within the investigative jurisdiction of the FBI. All such data is immediately sent to the Department of the Air Force for its consideration. By 1964, a letter is sent to the Associate Director of something called Interplanetary Intelligence of Unidentified Flying Objects in Oklahoma City. J. Edgar Hoover signs it personally. It says the same thing, not our jurisdiction, sent to the Air Force. And then in 1966, Stephen Gray in Cleburne, Texas, writes about that photograph, the one supposedly showing FBI agents with an alien. Hoover's response contains the sentence we started with, the one that should stop you cold no matter how many times you read it. Not a denial of flying objects, not a denial of outer space, a denial of custody. The FBI has never had custody of an occupant from a foreign planet. After nearly 30 decades, across 290 pages, through the Cold War and Sputnik and nuclear testing, and civilian investigative networks and surveillance reports and handwritten letters from farm wives in Michigan, this file ends exactly where it began, with the government saying it doesn't know and sending everything to the Air Force. And the Air Force, as this file makes plain on its very first substantive page, sends everything to Wright-Patterson.
After all these pages, only one question remains unanswered in this document, not about what was seen in the skies, not about whether the sightings were real. The question this file leaves open is simpler and more unsettling than any of that. If no agency had jurisdiction, if the FBI referred everything to the Air Force and the Air Force referred everything to Wright-Patterson, who in the end was actually responsible for finding out the truth? And did they? The file closes, the folder goes back on the shelf, and that question stays right where they left it.